When it comes to assessments in ABA, it's easy to fall into the trap of simply checking boxes off and filling in forms. But assessments should be so much more than that. They're really the foundation for creating individualized, effective programming that actually supports meaningful progress. In this episode, we're diving into how to go beyond surface level evaluations and use meaningful ABA assessments to truly understand our learners and guide impactful intervention. Whether you're a new BCBA or a seasoned clinician, this conversation will help you rethink how you use assessment tools, what you're looking for, and how to connect your findings to real world goals.
Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna.
We are behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach kids with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about meaningful ABA assessments. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
So imagine a high school teacher who is trying to prepare students for a standardized math exam. So the teacher wants to look like a rock star. So the teacher spends a lot of time in the semester focusing mainly exclusively on practicing test questions, rote memorization of formulas, even just basic test taking strategies like how to fill in boxes with a pencil so the computer can read them, right? The teacher goes through and just teaches these things. So instead of focusing in on the actual curriculum and the deep understanding of mathematical concepts, students really are only learning how to answer these basic types of questions that they expect to see on a test. They may pass the test with flying colors, and that teacher, that school may look amazing, but really, what does it do for the student in the long run? Not a lot. They may learn how to take a test, but they're not really understanding the true concepts, and it really isn't, going to further them in their math when they take something else next semester.
And we can talk about the whole broken system of education and how we are teaching our students to take tests as opposed to learning about what's real in the real world, but maybe for a different podcast. Today, we're talking about that as relates to assessments. We do a lot of assessments and they are important. We are required to track and measure progress. They can help us understand the learner. They help us understand where their strengths are, where their gaps might be. And it does help set the stage for what might be effective intervention. But the goal is not the assessment, right? The goal isn't to be able to check off every box on that assessment. It is really for us to be able to gather useful information that will then help guide programming.
So, how do we do that? I think the very first thing we need to do is really reframe our thoughts on what assessments are. Sometimes, when I go in and I see a learner for the first time, I automatically think, well, I need an assessment to put together a program. But every 6 months, a ding goes off on my calendar that says I need to reassess. And I'm like, oh, got to get this done for insurance purposes. I need to get this done for, this or this parent meeting coming up or whatever you've got to do it for. But we really need to reframe it and say, I need this assessment because it'll really help guide programming, but I don't want it to see what boxes they still don't have. So we need to really reframe what we're thinking.
We go through a whole bunch of the most common assessment tools in our other podcast episode 219. So go check that out. One of the biggest common mistakes that we see is treating assessments like curriculum. And you know what? Valid. If you just spent 3 or 4 months completing the assessment, which we will also address in a little bit, it's very easy to feel like it's now your teaching tool. And assessments really are just the starting point, not the end goal. So we see so often that programming is specific to a certain box on the assessment. We are going to teach, expressive labels from this section on the ABLES assessment. And really what that leads to is very cookie cutter programming. It's not individualized to the learner. It's not really going to be effective or meaningful. We talk a lot about choosing meaningful goals and making sure that they're functional and valuable to them. And while yes, expressive language is super important and super valuable, we have to ask ourselves why. Like, why are we teaching expressive language? Is it because they need to be able to go to the grocery store and ask for help? Or is it because they're sitting in a classroom and they need to give them, rote responses on certain subjects? And those are very different goals. So we have to always keep the big picture in mind, and the assessment does not become the thing that we're actually teaching to.
Can I go back to a comment you made earlier about you've spent about 3 months on an assessment, so you're really attached to it. I would say let's look at what we're spending time on and the reason for those assessments. Those assessments are to guide programming. We want to get, whatever student we're working with in programming as quickly as possible. So if you're spending that amount of time on an assessment, sure, your assessment will be thorough, but what did you achieve in the long run? Like the student has gone now 3 months without programming. So that's not great. So you need to find a balance there. We can't rush an assessment either. So what is that balance?
Well, the first thing is we don't give, this assessment over to an RBT or a therapist to complete, because then it does just become a test, and they're probing through all of the different boxes. They don't have the clinical skills, not expected to have the clinical judgment that we have. And so, as BCBAs, we are usually the ones to complete the assessment. We'll usually do it, if it's a new student, we'll usually do it within a couple of hours of meeting them, because we're trying to just put our ideas of the what this student's profile is, just put it on paper. Like from the little bit that we know them, you could do it after a couple of visits if you really want. What is a profile of this learner? And you could do that, without 100% accuracy, but it could be 80% accurate, and that could be good enough. If it's a learner that you've been working with for a little bit longer, and you might not be sure about a couple things, or did they actually make progress in this area, you could test those few areas, especially as it gets into more of the complex language skills. You could test a couple of those, or you could give a list of certain questions to ask to the RBT or to the therapist just because you're not sure, and that's okay. But it shouldn't become, a really long session of assessment-driven goals.
My favorite thing to do in an assessment is play, depending on the age of a learner. But if the learner is young enough, I just play. And, some learners have no play skills whatsoever, and I get a picture just from that. Okay, they don't have any play skills. What else do they do? What kinds of things do they like? Sometimes I'll ask parents ahead of time and come in with their favorite things. I try not to use my phone or an iPad or any type of screen in my assessment. I put my computer away. I typically have, a notebook with me with a pen, and I'm scribbling things down, or I'll take the How to ABA assessment, which is really a checklist that combines like the ABLES and VB-MAP goals. And, we have that on a couple pieces of paper. There's intermediate skills, there's beginner skills, there's some intermediate skills, there's some advanced skills. If the learner is beginner, I'm playing with them. And again, that play, I'm really pairing myself with reinforcement as I'm doing this as well. So I have that checklist in my hand or piece of paper and a pencil, and I have a bunch of preferred activities, and I'm trying to play. If a child is getting up and moving every 20 seconds and doesn't want me in their space, that gives me a lot of information, right? It gives me a lot of information in the fact that, they can't play, B, they don't have that, engagement or that adult interaction. I look though to see how they're engaging then with their parents or their caregivers to see whether or not any requests are being made, seeing if I can withhold items if they're asking for them in any way. If you've got a student who is, has had ABA before, I might look through some notes, or I might do some more complex play. Looking through books is always valuable. Again, going through some board games if they're a little bit older and seeing if they've got any type of turn taking ability, and not necessarily your turn, my turn, but more commenting like, hey, that was mine, or, hey, you go next, or okay, even if it's from a nonverbal standpoint, you could just see if they'll wait their turn and that type of thing. So even just that informal play can tell you a lot. And then oftentimes I'll just take that assessment or these pieces of paper, and as soon as I'm finished playing, I block my calendar for a little bit of time, like half an hour to an hour, and I just fill out an assessment. So they're not even there. And, there's boxes that I can fill out because it's like, yeah, yeah, I saw that, or no, I didn't see that. And then it also leaves me with some more questions, and that's okay. Having questions after an assessment is a great thing. I can write those questions down and flag them, and then I book another appointment and try and set up some situations where I can see some of those quote unquote questions being answered.
Right. The assessment doesn't have to look like testing when you're doing it a lot more naturally. our kids will show a lot more skill. We've had situations where, a child was able to, play with a play farm and talk about all the animals and say the animal sounds. And like they were so into it and so engaged, and we'd sing about it. And then you take them to the table and you show them a worksheet and they have to like circle or point to the cow or the sheep, and like all of a sudden they can't do it. And if we were just judging them based on the testing scenario, is that more meaningful than when they're engaged and when it's something meaningful to them, they can show the skill. And I think that that's really important. And it goes both ways. Sometimes kids can show skills only in testing, only in very discrete trial situations because they've learned to give the answer that they think you want to hear. But when it comes to real life situations, their ables could be full. And meanwhile, they're not really able to show it when it really matters. So to think about it both ways and make that assessment become more meaningful.
We also have to ask parents what their goals are. And, on our parent intake form that we typically use, a big section of it is, hey, parents, what do you value the most? What are your goals? And, some parents will give a very broad goal, like, I just want them to be in school by the time they're 5 or 6 or something. But, other parents will say, I actually really want to increase their I don't know, language skills. I want them to talk in 3-word phrases and I want them to request for things. Other parents will say, I really just want him to learn how to ride a bike because all his cousins do. And it's really, I just want him in there. So it's really varied among parents too. So ask them what's really important to them.
And then with all of our teaching and programming, we want to be teaching things across multiple operands. So that means that we want to assess across operands. We're not just looking at, siloed skills, because it's very common with a lot of our kids. They'll have very splintered skills. And so they might be strong in one area and weaker in another. And our assessment should show for that. But one of the things that we really try to do is not get stuck on these levels. Our kids are not always progressing fully incrementally. And that's okay because we want to work on the things that matter, especially a kid who's older than 5, already needing to have something that is working towards more functional type of skills. We try to leave the whole level thing and work on things that really matter to them. And so we go by skill, not by age, not by labels. Even though our assessment is categorized by beginner, intermediate, and advanced, it's really just to help you guide your programming. But everything from an assessment should then be individualized. And your learner is a unique individual. And so it should help you really just identify those strengths and the gaps, and then try to fill those in based on what you get from parents, like Shayna said, what might be their most common environment, what might be valuable to them, and all that other great information.
So then what comes next? You've done an assessment, you've got some results. What do I do? Do I just like spit out some boxes and go, okay, these boxes are empty. Do I teach them? Not necessarily. And the answer is actually not necessarily. The answer is a big no. No, please don't do that. Once you've identified those skill strengths, those gaps, what we really should be doing is translating that data into some meaningful goals. So again, asking yourself, what's a parent priority or a caregiver priority? And then what's the functional use of this skill? So for instance, if, one big thing is, hey, this student needs to be taught some receptive and expressive labels. Awesome. And then you go further and you go, okay, which labels should we start with? Well, you know what? The mother is in construction and she's got her toolbox home with her all the time. Well, guess what? That kid can be learning about those tools and what the labels of those tools are. That's very functional for that student. Whereas another student, the last thing I would teach them is the labels of tools because they don't see them on a regular basis. So you really need to look at that as well. But what's the functional use of this skill? We can say, well, expressive labels, we know what the functional use of that skill is. But what about other things? Like what's the functional use of riding a bike? My favorite goal, which is really sarcastic actually, is ties shoelaces. It's on the labels. It's like tie shoes. And I will teach some learners how to tie their shoes because it's a parent goal. But how often do you even tie your own shoes anymore? Like, you can buy so many shoes now, so many cool shoes that don't have shoelaces. And, even if shoes do have shoelaces, most teenagers slip on off their shoes and probably tie their shoes once every 6 months. So is that really a functional goal or is it even a functional use of your time? So looking at those kinds of things, right? When you're doing goals, looking at where the learner is going to use that goal. So like I said, expressive labels. Yeah, that's kind of an obvious goal. Manding, kind of an obvious goal, right? Shoelaces, well, if they're not going to use it, probably not worth teaching at this point in time.
Yeah, I think you're saying like just because a student doesn't have a certain skill or the box isn't filled in on an assessment, it doesn't mean we need to teach it. There are so many times where so many assessments focus on play skills. And then, we have kids who have been working on play skills until they're, 4, 5, 6, and then they're 8, 9, 10, and they're still working on the same play skills. Or we just assess an 8-year-old and they don't have play skills. And you know what? That's okay. It could be that they're not interested in play. They might be learning other things. At that age, it might look more like video games anyway, or they might get more into certain activities that don't look like pretend play anymore. So let's just abandon it. And there's so many things that come up with that. When you're thinking about which goals to pick, you really have to think about the big picture. How does it align with their values and needs? How can this become part of their daily environment? How can I teach this naturally? Those are all really important questions.
The other thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is making sure that we can progress programming, right? So we need to make sure our programming is very dynamic and not static. We can use assessments to do that. So again, reassessing every few months, not because insurance tells us to reassess, but because we want to be able to use that to make programming dynamic, making sure that we continue to measure goals. We are BCBAs, let's measure progress here, right? And adapt as needed. So, data is not going anywhere. Great. Let's look at why not, and let's see if there's some prerequisite skills, the student is missing. Oh, data's flying, so we put a goal in and they're getting, 90 to 100% almost right off the bat. Guess what? Let's move on. Let's move forward and see if we can probe through a lot of these things and teach a harder goal.
Yes, so many times we see programming just become so static because, well, I've run out of targets, or I guess that they're, struggling with this, so we'll just keep teaching it. And that doesn't have to be the case. Our assessment process has to happen all the time. We're constantly, supervising and updating and making sure that our students are continuing to learn.
So how do we do all this? In theory, this sounds really great. So what do we do? I think there's a few questions we need to ask ourselves. So one of those questions is that, are our assessments really guiding that individualized, meaningful programming?
And then thinking about, do your goals really reflect what's important to your learner, meaning your learner, their caregivers, their parents, their teachers, not just what's in that tool.
And another question is, are you really capturing the full scope of your learner's abilities or just what they can do at the table? So we need to make sure we're generalizing all the time.
For more information on meaningful ABA assessments, click the link on or around this video or in the description to join our free How to ABA membership. We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos, and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.